Hey everyone, so today I'm going to do a post comparing this Bulava, it's a Bulava club, that's what this is called, the Bulava. It's like a short mace or a long club with a, let's look at them, with a, this is 29.5 inches. This is a 41-inch mace, okay? And then we've got a club that is 19.25 inches with a 2-inch pommel, okay? And I compare these three. I compare centripetal force, I also compare angular momentum, and we'll mention torque, which I did in a previous post. I talked about torque, comparing these three, okay? Now they're all 8 kilograms each, which for those that are not familiar with kilograms, that's 17.6 pounds. So now, it's really interesting because the makeup of the particular club or mace and the, the length has a lot to do with, the forces that we're going to encounter when we're swinging these things. They're not all created equal, okay? So, yesterday in my post I talked about the Bulava, okay? I'm going to hold this, makes me feel comforted, okay? I talked about the Bulava compared to the club. And this actually, I was doing, I have a video doing a 300, which is like an 11 to 1 if you're looking at a clock. And the torque that I calculated was 105.5% higher in this Bulava than in the club of the same weight. Now, a lot of that is attributed to the length because it's significantly longer, but it's also much more head heavy, whereas the club in that handle carries a lot more weight, okay? So it makes a big difference. So we're talking about more than twice the amount of torque, okay? Then when I compared the mace to the Bulava, the mace was more, of course, because it's longer, but because they're both head heavy, the difference was only 34.4%, which again is still significant if we're doing the same movement. However, again, you see a big shift as far as not as much difference because, again, the Bulava is very head heavy, just like the mace is. Now, I did some other calculations because I wanted to add some to this, right? So I did centripetal force. Now, the torque was tough because I had to take torque of the shaft versus torque of the head. So I made all those adjustments for those of you thinking, I can't be accurate. I found center of mass for all this stuff for the torque. Now, when we're doing centripetal force, the angle is down the shaft, okay? Or I should say the vector of force is down the shaft, all right? So what does that mean? Well, first of all, centrifugal force and centripetal force are not the same. They're opposites, okay? Centripetal force is the force I have to generate to hold onto the club. It's the vector goes towards my center from the head of the club, okay, as I'm swinging it in a circle. So it's the force I need to keep swinging in a circle and to also not let it fly out into space, okay? Centrifugal force is actually the opposite of that, okay? It's the force generated by the mace that I have to resist. So it's like an equal opposite type thing when it comes to centripetal. But I always talk about centripetal force because I'm talking about the force that you have to generate to swing this club in a 360, or I'm going to show you a video where I did a mill with all of them, okay? In fact, let's look at that, then we'll talk about the forces. So the first one, here we'll do the Bulava first. And then let's look at a video swinging the club, right? And these are doing mills, club mills, so let's look at that. Okay. Now, let's look at one with the mace. Now, I had to stand on my DC blocks because the mace is long, right? So when I'm doing a mill with the mace, you'll see, right? And so let's look at that. Okay, now, so you see each of them. Now the pace is going to be different, and velocity is a big factor when we're calculating centripetal force. So I wanted to make those adjustments so that everything was, I'm going to call it equivocal, okay? So what I did was the pace for the club was about 27 reps per minute, okay? The pace, that's if you count a mill, and a mill goes through a circle twice, but if you count one mill, 27 per minute. The Bulava was 24 per minute, and the Mace was 22 per minute. So not a big difference, but definitely the longer the implement, the slower it was moving, the less velocity it was moving with, which again is going to factor into the calculation. Okay. However, despite the slower velocity, the Bulava club generated actually 35% more centripetal force, or I had to generate 35% more centripetal force to keep that club from flying out into space and to keep it moving in that arc and moving in that circle, okay? The Mace, compared to the Bulava club, the Mace was I had to generate 16.8% more centripetal force when swinging the Mace in the same movement, okay? But again, these are circular movements. You can't calculate centripetal force unless we're talking about circular movements, okay? So that's the comparison between those. Now, one thing I noticed, and you may notice this, and even if you look at some of the videos when I did the last one with the 10 to 2s with the club, or actually it was 11 to 1s, and when I did, even when I'm swinging, you know, the mills, the club is so much shorter, right, the steel club, that it doesn't have that same flow, doesn't have that same momentum. I really notice it. I have videos on these, but I didn't post it, but of doing all of these with a 360. And I got to tell you, with the club, it's not super comfortable. With the Bulava, it's very comfortable, and the Mace as well. Now, some people say, well, I feel like it's easier with one versus the other, right? Well, or even the Mace. It's supposed to be harder, but I feel like it's easier. And that most likely has everything to do with angular momentum. So what I did was I calculated angular momentum so we could see why it feels. It's not necessarily easier because you still have to generate more force. However, if we're using that momentum, it's going to be a smoother swing, okay? So the Bulava is definitely a smoother swing than the shorter club, and then the Mace is a smooth swing as well, just a slower, smoother swing, okay? Maybe even a little bit smoother, but let's look at the calculations. The Bulava club compared to the steel club actually has 2.6 times the angular momentum. That's pretty significant, okay? That's a significant difference. So you're getting that smoother flow, right? As we're flowing through these mills, you're getting that smoother flow utilizing that angular momentum, okay? It just makes it feel smoother, let's be honest. The Mace now, compared to the Bulava, was 1.77 times more angular momentum than the Bulava club, okay, the long club. And lastly, I was like, let's compare the Mace to the actual steel club because they feel vastly different. Because the Bulava feels good in a lot of these movements, the Mace feels good in these movements. Not all of the movements, the club, it feels okay with mills. It's a little short for it, but in my opinion. But what did we find when I compared Mace with steel club? 4.6 times more angular momentum. So that increased length and that head heaviness really generates a really smooth flow. And even if you have a shorter, like a Mace, let's say this 41-inch Mace, compared to a 45 or 48, you will notice that these, and there's a point of diminishing returns, but you will notice it just kind of floats a little bit more. Again, when we're opposing the force, we still have to use more, right? So it's not like it's making it easier for us because 180 degrees, it's, you know, the angular momentum and the gravity's working for us, but then the other 180 is working against us, okay? So anyway, hopefully this helps quantify why they feel different because it's really important. Also, White Line Athletics is one of the only companies I know that's like, you know, in North America that makes this type of stuff. I don't know any clubs in the U.S., any companies in the U.S. that make Bulava clubs. I know I've had people make them custom made, but no companies that actually produce them. And the only ones I know of are actually in Europe. So if you're interested in a Bulava club, White Line Athletics, cool stuff, fun stuff, well built by the way. Good people as well. So if you have any questions, let me know. Stay strong. Hope you enjoyed this little analysis, and I'll see you next time.